Well, good morning, everybody. Here's the big highlights we're watching here in the new forecast. And the most important thing to me has been this system that came out of Texas last night and just moved across parts now over the Ohio River Valley. And once it crossed parts of the Mid-South here, it delivered some desperately needed rains. And this is just a good soaker right in this area. So happy to see this. Looking over the last 72 hours, you can see some places here picking up well over an inch of rainfall. And this gets to continue moving on out into parts of New England later today. Now, why this is important is if you just look back over the last month, so much of the Midwest, Ohio River Valley, the lower Mississippi River Valley, the Tennessee Valley, this whole area has been quite dry. And the month of November was a relatively benign month overall. What did we get out of it? Well, we didn't get much of a change in our drought picture. I mean, we were hoping that November was going to be corrective in the South, corrective in the Midwest, corrective in the Southeast, and it really didn't do that. So where do we stand? We still have problems with the Mississippi being about 5 feet below low stage. So much of the Mississippi Basin and all the major tributaries contributing to it still showing pretty low here. But as I've been talking about, the big shifts so far in December is this ridge coming into parts of Greenland, the momentum in the Pacific jet just rolling through here, and we're going to be watching for a drier, warmer time period after this weekend in the midsection of the country, but activity resumes around the 8th, 9th, and 10th as this next trough starts to drop in. So today's All Hazards Weather Map reflects where the main action is going to be for much of the next week. It's here in the west, specifically the Pacific Northwest. Winter storm warnings, winter storm watches, advisories, flood watches, advisories. It's going to be windy, wet, and huge snows are going to be coming into that area. But before we get into that, we still need to watch the rest of what happens with this system here, because it pulls through the northeast. There it is, going into tonight, into tomorrow morning. And then by, again, I got a little ahead of my time there. This afternoon into this evening, this is when all this pulls through. Watch the snow on the back side of it. And then we do get to watch a second surge of moisture with this other trough that's sneaking into parts of Kansas. Out ahead of it, it's going to be drawing moisture into the Gulf. And there you can see the snow coming out of Kansas, Nebraska, Iowa. You can see the heavier rains in the southeast. And then all attention is going to go into the Pacific Northwest. That's because over the next week, it's just nearly straight flow coming in here multiple times. Some parts, as you can see from the WPC forecast, are expecting to get upwards of 8 to 10 inches of liquid equivalent. Big time snows here. None of this is making over to the mountains, so notice how dry we are in parts of the plains and prairie. And most of this you see here is coming now with a secondary kick this weekend into New England. Heavier rains resurging on Saturday down south, but a big section of the country going over drier. No good flow coming into California. This pattern, it's too much in the north rather than out of the southwest. That's why the heaviest precipitation's here. Snow-wise, I mean, we may be picking up 3 to 5 feet of snow in parts of the Cascades, 1 to 2 feet in the northern Rockies, and some even decent snow here in the central Rockies. With the second pulse of snow coming through this section of the Midwest, we could add a little bit more. And New England gets a good shot at the end of the weekend. Northern New York, Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine are looking at some decent snows. But the bigger picture is this. These are our wetter areas. Probability of getting at least an inch over the next 10 days. I mean, I can just keep going. Here's 2 inches. I mean, major precip in the south, but look at the northwest. Here's 4, 8. I mean, just keep going up. High probabilities. But the drier side of things show up pretty clearly here. So what are we waiting on? What we're waiting on to correct some of this could be coming around the 10th. It's this trough that's got this nice positive tilt to it that's going to dig into parts of the south. And that's why the models for week 2 have gone over wetter in the big section here of the central United States. European did it. GFS started to trend there. So I like this look for this, December 8 through 14 time frame for kicking off a big central United States storm system. Temperature-wise, look at the heat we're going to be getting by the middle of next week coming out of the northern plains. Temperatures here are going to really rebound up to maybe 20 to 30 degrees above normal. But I think the pattern's going to transition later in the month. There's the next 5 days. This is day 5 through 10 when that heat is on. But then notice day 10 through 15, the pattern progresses and begins to show signs of kicking this pattern forward, progressing it toward the Atlantic Ocean. There's a lot of support for this. The MJO transitioning out of the Indian Ocean, north of Australia, then expected to come back over to the West Pacific later in the month. And that's why the new longer range models go back over to possibly some split flow in the west, but keep the subtropical jet just cranking down here for December 10th to January 10th. Now, thinking about what this winter really might look like, I'm going to rely on the fact that we do have an El Nino. It's not nearly as strong as we thought, but there's also a competing factor with the negative PDO farther to the north. So just to kind of bring you up to speed, we look at all of our El Nino events since 1960. They tended to have better storm systems in the Midwest, but very wet south. The problem in the west is the flow tended to split at times there. So we have to be on the lookout for that, given that this El Nino is likely going to peak sometime in the next 45 to 60 days. Now remember, when we have El Nino winters, they almost always peak after December in terms of winter weather. December El Ninos tend to be very mild across the northern tier of the United States, cooler in the southwest, and they make a huge flip into the month of January and February. So we need to be prepared for that December will not look like January and February. So as we kind of watch these forecasts evolve over the next couple of weeks, that's something to think about. In the in-depth forecast, I spend more time talking about the model differences between the European and the GFS. GFS is substantially drier farther to the north than the European is. So that's a critical thing. Go watch the in-depth video if you want more information on that. But both of those longer range models, as we approach the 3rd and 4th week of December, attempt to deliver better rains into northern Brazil. This will be absolutely critical. Mid-December to the end of December will determine what we're expecting in terms of yield and production out of Brazil. And lastly, sorry, my short-term video here is a little bit longer than normal. Still watching Panama in terms of drought development in December. If they don't get rains in December, this is going to be a problem we'll talk about clear next June. And finally, big snows through the Alps coming into Russia. Germany's getting hit hard with snow, maybe up to 3 feet of it in the Alps. Still a little bit more rain in parts of eastern Australia. South Africa is continuing to be dry. Better rains coming through Indonesia, out of India, and you can see the disparity down here in South America. That gives you a quick international update. So we'll talk again next week. Thanks for your attention this week, and have a good one. Thanks.